It's never explicitly said, hey, don't worry about the psychological problems or the spiritual or the societal issues. There's so much focus on one area that it feels like, why would I focus on those other things for my mental health?
Just unbidden, intrusive thoughts, disturbing content, which adds another layer of stress.
People come in with problems and you put them on the medications, and sometimes there is a therapeutic effect. But what I was seeing in my residency was, 6 months later, maybe 12 months later, that effect has now worn off.
If you go into Google right now and say, what is depression? You're going to get Eli Lilly ads. You're going to get Zoloft sales on the right-hand side. And the default presupposition is that depression is caused by brain chemical imbalance. And Dr. Bregan seems to think, and I wanted to ask you the same question, there is no science between that claim that brain biochemical imbalance causes depression, that rather depression is a much more complicated condition that has more to do with things like the loss of hope. Welcome to this episode of the Patrick Coffin Show, brought to you by my very own community. It's called the True North Community. We talk about sanity and sanctity and the things that matter in this life and the next. We talk about culture and faith and evangelization, but mostly we talk about what's the next right step to do in your life. And today we're going to talk about mental illness, the definition of mental health, and some of the hazards of psychotropic drugs. I've hit this topic before with my good friend and mentor, Dr. Peter Bregan, and I'm looking forward to diving deep with my guest. Go to patrickcoffin.media to find out more about True North and about everything else that I do. Blog there, merch, pilgrimages, much else besides, patrickcoffin.media. My guest for this episode is Dr. Josef Witt-Doerring. He is a board-certified psychiatrist and expert in the side effects and the procedures of withdrawal from psychotropic drugs. I've been following him for a couple of years now. His content is excellent, and I'm so happy that he's joined us. Thanks for coming on.
Patrick, I'm delighted to be here.
Tell me about, if we can hit the rewind button a little bit, did you always want to help people when you were a kid? Is this the seed of your calling as a physician and psychiatrist? Did that begin early on, or did you kind of come late to the game?
I wanted to help myself is the honest answer. And so I was always really interested in self-help and philosophy and psychology. I just naturally gravitated to it while I was growing up. Those were the kinds of books I liked to read. And really it was just for normal teenage stuff, how to get a girlfriend, how to find out, the type of job that you want to have, how to live with purpose. And, and so there was always this natural draw, and it became a big passion of mine. And it's kind of funny, I stumbled into medicine. This may be relatable for some people here, but I went to a school where everyone essentially became a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. That was like kind of what you could do. My mom is Chinese as well. And so, in a way, that was also what I could do. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, well, I'll go into medicine. That sounds interesting. And I had good grades. And while I was in medical school, I was just still really into personal development and, understanding, what are the factors that lead to human thriving, in relationships and work. And I was always more interested in the psychological side of things. And so I said, well, look, there's this thing called psychiatry here. Maybe this could be a great way for me to, have this medical degree, but actually work in an area where I have a lot of passion. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I ended up stumbling into psychiatry.
You did your residency at Baylor?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So med school at University of Queensland, then residency at Baylor. And then there's a few other sort of interesting steps after that kind of ultimately leads me to turning my back on, psychiatric medications.
We'll definitely get to that turning of the back.
Yeah.
At some point in your training, or maybe in your experience as a clinician, did you notice that the model of the human person that was kind of the default position is that brain biochemistry imbalances are really the problem, and so you want to treat the patient like almost like with a materialistic presupposition, that the idea of hope, choice, the soul, even the mind as something immaterial was quite foreign, that it was more reductionistic, that psychiatric problems can be solved with just the right combination of this pill or that pill, or a cocktail of. Did you discover that in med school
Yeah.
or later as a psychiatrist?
So it started in medical school, and that is exactly um, how it's taught. It's never explicitly said, "Hey, don't worry about the psychological problems or the spiritual or the societal issues going on." They never say that, but the obsession in medical school and residency and with the psychiatric profession with drugs and biology makes it almost feel like those things are an afterthought. There's so much focus on one area that it feels like, why would I focus on those other things for my mental health? It's almost like diet. People think, why would I focus on my diet and exercise and getting outside for my mental health?
Hmm.
Surely, if these things were important, doctors would be telling me more about this. But in fact, every time I go and see the doctor, what's your dose? Should we go up? Should we go down? Should we hold it the same? Should we try something new? And so my feeling was always that they gave lip service to all of the things that I think people intuitively know impact their mental health. They gave lip service to them, but really prioritized biological explanations, and that was very. And I think from the get go, that was very disturbing, and that was one of the reasons that kind of sent me off on a different path.
Hmm. Am I remembering correctly that you had a bout where you had recurrent anxiety and had a bad relationship with Xanax? Is memory serving here?
Yeah. So shortly after my daughter was born, I was working for the FDA, and I wasn't sleeping very well. I was burning the candles on both ends. I was working for them. I was moonlighting at the same time, and I was completely abusing stimulants. I mean, I was drinking like a large cup of coffee in the morning and then following it up with 2 Diet Cokes during the day. I also had about 5 nicotine pouches in my mouth throughout the day, just
Hmm.
thinking that, if I could stay, stimulated enough, I'd be able to, do all of my FDA reports and then, see patients after work at my moonlighting gig. And I completely just destroyed my sleep. I wasn't moving my body. I wasn't eating the right food. I was overly stimulated. And I started, I asked a nurse practitioner for some Xanax. And I was just like, well, I work nights sometimes. And they said, yeah, okay, you can take it. And, I'd take it for one night. And before you know it, a few months later, you're taking it every single night.
Yeah, just
And
to
it
hit
works
normal, right?
great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just to get like 6 hours of sleep, like it wasn't even that good. I mean, I and I see this with a lot of my patients now, especially those who don't look after themselves and they're